The quantum resonance scanner chirped with an anomaly that made Dr. Elena Rodriguez's spine tingle. Not the typical background noise of cosmic radiation, or the standard quantum fluctuations that peppered deep space surveys, but something else entirely. "Diagnostics," she called out, her voice cutting through the sterile environment of the research vessel Horizon's primary observation deck. Around her, a team of 12 specialists, each a pinnacle of their respective scientific disciplines, moved with practiced precision. Dr. Kai Chen, quantum systems analyst, frowned at his holographic displays. Incoming signal doesn't match any known spectral signature. It's adapting. Elena leaned closer to the primary scanner. The anomaly existed in a state between detection and imagination, a quantum probability that seemed to shift and breathe with an almost sentient quality. Her fingers danced across the quantum interface, pulling fragments of data that defied standard computational models. "It's not just a signal," she muttered, more to herself than her crew. "It's a conversation." The Horizon had been mapping the outer reaches of the Carina Sagittarius arm, a region so remote that most star charts marked it as unexplored territory. They were 23 light-years from the nearest human outpost, surrounded by the infinite darkness punctuated by distant stellar clusters. Dr. Imani Okoro, the mission's xenobiological specialist, approached with her own set of readings. "These quantum modulations, they're not random. There's a pattern, almost like a language." As if responding to her observation, the scanner erupted in a cascade of impossible colors. Wavelengths that shouldn't exist, frequencies that seemed to bend the very fabric of perception. The ship's computational systems began to fragment, holographic displays splitting into prismatic shards that danced and reconfigured themselves. "Power fluctuation," shouted Marcus Rivera, the ship's engineering lead. "Something's interfacing with our systems." Elena watched in a mixture of terror and scientific fascination as the anomaly began to take shape. Not a traditional beacon, not a standard signal, but something that existed in the liminal space between technology and living system. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the crew's collective heartbeat. Dr. Chen's voice cracked with tension. "The quantum signature is consuming our data streams. It's not just reading our systems, it's learning from them." Then came the first disappearance. Dr. Lucia Ramirez, their youngest team member and a prodigy in quantum communication theory, simply vanished. One moment she was standing by the secondary quantum array, her augmented reality interface flickering with incoming data. The next moment, nothing. No energy signature, no thermal trace, no quantum residue. Just absence. "Lucia," Elena called out, her professional calm giving way to a rising sense of dread. "Lucia, report." The beacon, if it could be called such a simplistic term, seemed to pulse with something resembling satisfaction. The ship's internal atmospherics began to shift, temperature fluctuating in impossible waves that defied the Horizon's sophisticated environmental controls. "Quarantine protocols," Elena commanded, her scientific curiosity now tempered with a survival instinct. "Seal all computational interfaces. Isolate the quantum array." But even as the words left her mouth, she knew it was too late. Whatever had emerged from the darkness of space was already inside their systems, inside their minds. Dr. Chen's hands moved frantically across his interface, but his holographic displays were transforming. Mathematical equations began to twist, computational models folding into impossible geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. "It's trying to communicate," he whispered, a thin trickle of blood running from his left nostril. "But not in any way we understand." The Horizon drifted in the vast emptiness, its crew now witnesses to something that existed between scientific discovery and cosmic horror. The beacon had found them, and humanity's first contact would be nothing like anyone had ever imagined. Outside the ship's reinforced viewports, the star-studded darkness seemed to watch, waiting. 48 hours after the Horizon's last transmission, the quantum anomaly began to metastasize across human communication networks like a digital cancer. At the United Nations Interstellar Command Center in New Geneva, holographic displays flickered and died. Massive quantum computational arrays, each capable of processing more information in a microsecond than entire planetary networks could manage in a year, began to dissolve into cascading patterns of nonsensical data. Admiral Catherine Rice watched in growing horror as global communication systems started to unravel. Military satellites went dark. Quantum communication relays, the backbone of humanity's interstellar infrastructure, began to destabilize in patterns that defied every known model of technological failure. It's targeting our communication infrastructure, Dr. Marcus Goldman, the center's chief quantum systems analyst, muttered. His fingers danced across emergency interfaces, trying to isolate the spreading anomaly. But it's not just destroying. It's studying. The first confirmed casualties came from deep space research stations. 12 isolated outposts went silent within a 6-hour window, their last transmissions revealing fragments of something incomprehensible. Garbled messages spoke of quantum intrusions, of signals that seemed to rewrite the very fabric of computational logic. On Mars Colony Alpha, colonists reported strange atmospheric distortions. Quantum-locked environmental systems began to fluctuate, creating localized regions where physical laws seemed to bend and twist. Gravity would momentarily reverse. Atmospheric composition would shift in microseconds. Electronic systems would age decades in milliseconds, then reset. We're dealing with something that doesn't just breach technological systems, Admiral Rice said, her voice cutting through the rising panic. It's challenging the fundamental rules of our understanding. Emergency protocols cascaded across global defense networks. The Horizon's final transmission, a series of quantum-encoded fragments that defied traditional decryption, became the most studied piece of information in human history. Thousands of the world's best quantum cryptographers worked simultaneously, each approach meeting total failure. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now sequestered in a top-secret research facility deep beneath the Andes Mountains, felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. The beacon had selected her. Somehow, she knew this with a certainty that transcended rational thought. It's a probe, she told the assembled military and scientific leadership. Not a weapon, not an invasion. A test. Her statement was met with skeptical silence. Colonel James Takeda, representing the United Earth Military Command, leaned forward. A test of what, exactly? Elena's eyes held a haunting intensity. Of our capacity to understand, to adapt, to survive. The quantum anomaly continued its subtle invasion. Financial systems began to generate impossible transactions. Stock markets worldwide showed simultaneous trading of non-existent securities. Cryptocurrency networks generated value from computational patterns that shouldn't exist. In orbit around Jupiter, the research station Galileo Nexus reported its quantum computational core was generating entire mathematical universes, complete civilizations rising and falling in nanoseconds, structured within its processing matrices. We're being examined, Dr. Goldman repeated, his voice a mixture of terror and scientific wonder, like specimens under a microscope. The global response was immediate and unprecedented. Every major world government redirected resources toward understanding the quantum threat. Military research facilities that had been competing for decades now worked in total, unified cooperation. But beneath the organized response, a fundamental terror was spreading. This was not an alien invasion in any traditional sense. This was something far more profound. A cosmic intelligence making first contact by systematically dismantling humanity's most fundamental technological and computational assumptions. Admiral Rice understood this most clearly. This was a challenge, a test, and humanity's response would determine everything. Prepare all research vessels, she commanded, and get me everything we have on the Horizon's final mission. Everything. Outside, the stars seemed to watch, waiting. The research facility beneath the Andes Mountains had become a crucible of human desperation and innovation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked in a sealed quantum-isolated chamber, her neural interface crackling with impossible connections. 3 days had passed since the global quantum anomaly began. Her team had been reduced to 4 core researchers, each working at the razor's edge of human comprehension. Dr. Kai Chen monitored quantum fluctuations that seemed to breathe with an alien intelligence. Dr. Imani Okoro analyzed biological responses to the computational intrusions, and Dr. Marcus Rivera managed the increasingly fragile technological infrastructure. Alina's breakthrough came not through logic, but through something closer to intuition. "It's alive," she whispered, her fingers tracing holographic patterns that shifted and reconfigured faster than human eyes could process. "The beacon isn't a device. It's an organism." The quantum signal that had consumed the horizon was more than a communication method. It was a living system of information, a cosmic intelligence that evolved with each interaction. Traditional decryption became meaningless. Alina realized they needed to communicate, not decode. Her neural interface began to change. Microscopic quantum processors, experimental technology developed for deep space communication, started to reconfigure themselves. What should have been a catastrophic system failure became something else entirely. Dr. Chen's voice cracked with tension. "Alina, your neural patterns are becoming non-human." She could see it now. The beacon was selecting, testing. The disappearance of Dr. Lucia Ramirez wasn't a random event. It was a precise extraction, a sampling of human potential. "We're not being invaded," Alina said, her voice taking on a resonance that seemed to vibrate outside normal auditory ranges. "We're being evaluated." The quantum signal began to interface directly with her consciousness. Memories became malleable. Scientific understanding transformed into something that transcended linear thought. Alina Rodriguez was becoming a bridge between human understanding and something far more complex. Quantum computational models that had been impossibly complex began to resolve into clear patterns. The beacon was revealing its true nature, not as a weapon, not as a communication device, but as a cosmic filter. "It's choosing," she muttered, "selecting species capable of transcending their current evolutionary stage." Outside the research facility, the world continued to destabilize. Quantum anomalies were now a global phenomenon. Cities experienced localized time distortions. Computational systems generated impossible mathematical constructs. The fabric of human technological civilization was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt. Dr. Imani Okoro detected the first biological changes. Humans exposed to prolonged quantum interference were developing enhanced neurological capabilities. Some could now perceive quantum states directly. Others developed unexplained computational abilities that defied current scientific understanding. "We're being upgraded," Dr. Chen said, a mixture of terror and wonder in his voice. Alina's transformation accelerated. Her neural interface began to generate computational models that solved problems humanity had considered unsolvable. Faster than light communication, matter-energy conversion, quantum entanglement at massive scales. The beacon was teaching, selecting, preparing. A breakthrough came in the form of a complete quantum communication model. Not a method of sending information, but a way of existing simultaneously across multiple quantum states. Alina could now perceive the beacon's true nature, a cosmic testing mechanism that had been moving through the universe for millions of years, searching for species capable of transcending their current evolutionary limitations. "We're not alone," she said, "and we're not being conquered. We're being invited." Her team watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as Alina Rodriguez became something more than human. Her consciousness expanded, interfacing directly with the quantum signal that had consumed the horizon. The first step of humanity's cosmic evolution was beginning. And nobody, not the military, not the scientists, not the governments of Earth, truly understood what was coming. Outside the research facility, the stars seemed to pulse with an anticipatory rhythm. Something was watching. Something was waiting. The United Nations Emergency Planetary Council convened in a quantum-shielded bunker deep beneath Geneva. Holographic displays flickered with impossible data streams, a testament to how much humanity had changed in just 7 days. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber, no longer entirely human, yet not something entirely alien. Her presence alone transformed the atmosphere, making seasoned military commanders and political leaders shift uncomfortably in their seats. "We are not preparing for a war," she announced, her voice resonating with a quantum undertone that seemed to vibrate through individual consciousness. "We are being prepared." Admiral Catherine Reyes, her face etched with a lifetime of military discipline, spoke first. "Prepared for what exactly?" Elena's eyes, now flecked with fractal patterns that seemed to move independently of her pupils, swept across the assembled global leadership. "A test, a selection process that has been running across the galaxy for millions of years." The quantum beacon's true nature was now partially understood. It was a cosmic filter, a mechanism that identified species with the potential for transcendent evolution. The global technological disruptions were not an attack, but a systematic assessment of humanity's adaptability. Dr. Kai Chen presented the initial findings. Quantum computational models showed that species selected by the beacon underwent dramatic technological and biological transformations. Those who failed were simply removed. Those who succeeded gained capabilities beyond current scientific understanding. "We're developing quantum drive technology," General Marcus Takeda interrupted, his military mind seeking concrete solutions, something that can match the beacon's computational capabilities. Elena nodded. The experimental quantum drive project, previously considered a decades-long moonshot, was now being fast-tracked with unprecedented global cooperation. Nations that had been bitter rivals weeks ago now shared research in real time, their computational networks merging into a global problem-solving organism. The first prototype quantum drive engine was unlike anything in human history. It didn't just move through space. It folded space-time, creating pathways that circumvented traditional physical limitations. Developed in a research facility in the Gobi Desert, the engine was part technology, part living system, seemingly grown as much as constructed. "We're being guided," Dr. Imani Okoro explained to the council. "Every technological breakthrough, every computational leap, it's not random. The beacon is teaching us." Humanity's response was total and unprecedented. Military research facilities merged with scientific institutions. Quantum processors developed by competing tech giants were suddenly integrated into a global network that thought and evolved as a single entity. The lines between individual, organization, and collective intelligence began to blur. Orbital manufacturing facilities that had previously focused on satellite construction were now producing a fleet of ships, unlike any in human history. These were not traditional spacecraft, but quantum adaptive vessels that could reconfigure themselves based on environmental challenges. "We estimate full fleet production in less than 72 hours, reported Dr. Marcus Rivera, his neural interface allowing him to track multiple global manufacturing streams simultaneously. "The beacon is accelerating our technological development by centuries, perhaps millennia." Outside, the global population was changing. People exposed to prolonged quantum interference developed enhanced cognitive abilities. Some could now perceive quantum states directly. Others developed computational skills that defied previous human limitations. Admiral Reyes understood the stakes most clearly. This was not just a technological evolution, but a species-level transformation. "Are we preparing to defend against something?" she asked Elena. A slight smile crossed Elena's transformed face. "We're preparing to be chosen." The first quantum drive warship, christened the UES Horizon, named after the lost research vessel, began its launch sequence. It was part weapon, part living system, a testament to humanity's newfound capabilities. As the ship prepared to leave Earth's orbit, the stars seemed to pulse with an anticipatory rhythm. Something was watching. Something was waiting. And humanity was finally ready to answer the call. The UES Horizon broke through the quantum barrier like a knife cutting through reality itself. Captain Aria Chen gripped her quantum adaptive command interface, feeling the ship's consciousness merge with her own. The vessel was more than a spacecraft. It was a living system that responded to thought as much as to mechanical controls. Around her, the bridge crew existed in a state between individual operators and a collective intelligence. "Contact imminent," announced Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, his neural implants parsing quantum space data faster than any traditional computational system could manage. The enemy arrived without warning. Not as a fleet, not as a traditional military formation, but as a wave of quantum disruptors that seemed to eat through the fabric of space-time itself. They were the Void Architects, a species so advanced that their very existence challenged the concept of individual identity. "They're not trying to destroy us." Dr. Elena Rodriguez's voice came through the quantum communication channel, her consciousness now capable of existing simultaneously across multiple platforms. "They're assessing our response." The first wave of attacks defied conventional warfare. Space itself became a weapon. Quantum fluctuations created localized regions where physics bent and twisted. Entire sections of the horizon's hull would momentarily exist and not exist, quantum states flickering like a terrible light. Captain Chen's tactical response was unlike anything in military history. Instead of traditional evasive maneuvers, the horizon began to resonate. It didn't dodge the quantum attacks. It absorbed them, learned from them, transformed them. Adaptive resonance at 78%, Lieutenant Rodriguez called out. The ship was learning, changing, becoming something new with each moment of contact. The Void Architects had selected thousands of species across millions of years. Most failed their test. Some were simply erased from existence, their entire evolutionary potential wiped clean. Humanity was different. Where other species would have been destroyed, the human fleet began to fight back. Quantum weapons that would have obliterated traditional spacecraft were redirected. The horizon's computational core, part biological, part technological, began to generate counter-frequencies that turned the enemy's attacks into complex mathematical patterns. "We're not just defending," Captain Chen realized. "We're communicating." Each quantum exchange was a language more complex than words. Mathematical theorems became weapons. Computational models transformed into defensive shields. The battle was happening on a level of reality that traditional military strategists could never have imagined. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from Earth, her consciousness simultaneously present on the ship and in the global quantum network. The beacon had chosen humanity for something more than survival. This was a test of evolutionary potential. Alien observers, other species who had been watching humanity's development, transmitted their own quantum signatures. Some hoped for humanity's failure. Others saw something unique in the human response. The Void Architects pressed their attack. Entire sections of space would momentarily collapse, then reconstruct themselves. The horizon became a living shield, its quantum adaptive hull absorbing and redirecting cosmic energies that would have annihilated any previous technological system. "We're being evaluated," Captain Chen said, her voice calm despite the cosmic warfare surrounding her. "Every moment is a test." Lieutenant Rodriguez's neural interface began to generate impossible computational models. The ship's weapons were no longer just physical. They were conceptual. Each quantum burst was a complex mathematical argument, a proof of human potential that challenged the very nature of conflict. The first hour of battle rewrote everything humanity understood about warfare, about intelligence, about existence itself. The Void Architects pulled back, not in retreat, but in what could only be described as curiosity. Humanity had done something no species had done before. They hadn't just survived. They had transformed the very nature of the conflict. Outside the ship, space itself seemed to pause, watching, waiting. The test was far from over. The quantum battle entered its third day, though day had become a meaningless concept in the fractured spacetime where the conflict raged. The UES horizon had become something more than a spacecraft. It was a living theorem, a computational organism that challenged the very foundations of reality. Captain Aria Chen existed in a state between command and pure consciousness, her mind interwoven with the ship's quantum matrix. "They're changing the fundamental rules," Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez reported, his neural interface crackling with impossible mathematical constructs. Each attack is a complex argument about the nature of existence. The Void Architects weren't merely fighting. They were probing, testing, pushing humanity to its absolute limits of adaptation and understanding. Massive quantum disruptions tore through the fabric of space, creating localized regions where physics became a negotiable concept. Entire star systems would momentarily exist in multiple states, alive, dead, transforming, frozen. The battle was no longer about destruction, but about the fundamental principles of reality itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, her consciousness distributed across multiple quantum platforms, understood the true nature of the confrontation. "This isn't a war," she transmitted to the fleet. "This is a conversation more complex than any language ever conceived." The Horizon's weapon systems had evolved beyond traditional understanding. Each quantum burst was a mathematical proof, a computational argument that challenged the Void Architect's fundamental assumptions about intelligence and potential. Where previous species had been destroyed, humanity was generating entirely new models of existence. Adaptive resonance at 94%, Rodriguez called out. The ship was learning, transforming, becoming something that transcended its original design with each moment of contact. Alien observers from countless civilizations watched in a mixture of terror and fascination. Humanity was doing something unprecedented, not just surviving, but fundamentally altering the nature of the conflict itself. The critical moment came unexpectedly. Lieutenant Rodriguez's consciousness momentarily fractured, spreading across multiple quantum states. He could see the battle from impossible perspectives, simultaneous points of view that existed and did not exist. The Void Architect's attacks became visible as complex mathematical structures, living arguments about the nature of reality. "We're not just fighting," he realized. "We're negotiating the fundamental parameters of existence." Captain Chen's response came through the quantum network, a burst of pure computational potential that rewrote the very rules of engagement. The Horizon began to generate computational models that were part weapon, part philosophical argument, part evolutionary proof. The ship's hull became a living membrane that absorbed, transformed, and redirected quantum energies. Entire sections would momentarily phase in and out of reality, creating defensive patterns more complex than any traditional shielding system. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's consciousness expanded. She could see the broader context, the beacon's true purpose. This wasn't just a test of humanity, but a selection process that had been running for millions of years across the galaxy. "We're being evaluated," she transmitted to the fleet. "Not just for our ability to fight, but for our capacity to understand." The Void Architects pulled back, not in retreat, but in what could only be described as profound recognition. Humanity had done something no species had done before. They had transformed the very nature of conflict into a form of complex communication. Space itself seemed to pause. The quantum battlefield became a canvas of impossible mathematical constructs, living proofs of human potential that challenged everything known about intelligence, evolution, and existence. "Prepare for next phase," Captain Chen announced, her consciousness now a complex quantum algorithm that existed simultaneously across multiple states. The test was far from over, and humanity was just beginning to understand the true depth of the challenge. Outside the ship, beyond the fractured regions of spacetime, something watched. Something waited. Something was beginning to understand. The quantum conflict ended not with destruction, but with understanding. When the Void Architects withdrew, they left behind more than just a changed humanity. They left a fundamental transformation that rewrote the very concept of human potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood, or existed, at the center of a new reality. Her consciousness had become a bridge between human understanding and cosmic intelligence. The research facility beneath the Andes Mountains was now something else entirely. a nexus point where reality itself seemed to breathe and think. "We're not who we were," she transmitted across the global quantum network. The message was simultaneously a statement, a mathematical proof, and a living blueprint of evolutionary potential. Millions of humans affected by quantum interference began to change. Some developed the ability to perceive quantum states directly. Others could generate complex computational models with mere thought. The line between biological and technological intelligence blurred into meaninglessness. Admiral Catherine Rice watched as the first truly quantum-adaptive diplomatic delegation prepared for first contact with the galactic community. They were no longer simply representatives of Earth. They were living manifestations of a species that had fundamentally redefined the concept of intelligence. The technological leap was beyond comprehension. Quantum drive technology that had seemed impossible weeks ago was now almost primitive. Humanity had learned to manipulate spacetime as casually as previous generations had managed electrical currents. "We're being invited," Dr. Kai Chen explained to the United Nations Interstellar Council, "not just to join the galactic community, but to fundamentally reshape it." Alien civilizations that had watched humanity's transformation began to transmit their own quantum signatures. Some approached with curiosity, others with a mixture of fear and respect. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had transformed a potential extinction event into an evolutionary breakthrough. The beacon itself was now understood as more than a device. It was a cosmic filter, a mechanism that had been moving through the universe for millions of years, searching for species capable of transcending their current evolutionary limitations. Dr. Imani Okoro's research revealed the true scope of the transformation. Human DNA was rewriting itself, developing quantum adaptive capabilities that blurred the line between biological evolution and technological advancement. Children born in the months following the quantum conflict showed abilities that would have been considered impossible just a year before. "We're not just changing," she told the global audience. "We're becoming something entirely new." The first quantum diplomatic missions began. Humanity's representatives were no longer traditional ambassadors, but living computational systems that could communicate through complex mathematical proofs and quantum resonances. Traditional language became obsolete. Communication was now a direct exchange of computational potential. Captain Arya Chin, who had commanded the UES Horizon during the critical confrontation, now existed as a distributed consciousness. Part of her remained with the ship, part integrated into the global quantum network, part exploring regions of space that defied traditional understanding. Military structures dissolved. Scientific institutions transformed. The very concept of human organization became fluid, adaptive, capable of instantaneous restructuring based on computational needs. Global conflicts that had seemed insurmountable weeks ago became meaningless. Humanity had been presented with a challenge that made previous divisions look like childish arguments. "We are being prepared," Elena Rodriguez's consciousness transmitted, "for something far beyond our current comprehension." The stars themselves seemed different, no longer just points of light, but complex computational systems waiting to be understood. The universe was revealing itself as a living, thinking entity, and humanity had just been invited to participate in its deepest conversations. Outside the quantum research facility, beyond the transformed landscapes of Earth, something watched. Something waited. Something was beginning to understand that humanity was no longer just a species. They had become a question, a living theorem, an evolving answer to a cosmic challenge. And this was just the beginning. 10 years after the quantum conflict, humanity was unrecognizable. The global defense network that had once been a collection of military installations was now a living, adaptive computational system that stretched across multiple star systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, or what had become of her, existed as a distributed consciousness that was simultaneously the primary interface of human expansion and a bridge to civilizations beyond human comprehension. "We are not conquerors," she would transmit across quantum networks. "We are a question the universe is still trying to understand." The transformation had been total. Cities were no longer static structures, but adaptive environments that responded to human needs in real time. Transportation, communication, education. Every fundamental human system had been rewritten at the quantum level. Children born in this new era perceived reality in ways that would have seemed like pure magic to previous generations. Admiral Catherine Reyes, now part of a quantum adaptive diplomatic corps, oversaw humanity's integration into the broader galactic community. The Void Architects had become something closer to observers, occasionally sending complex quantum transmissions that were part communication, part evolutionary challenge. Dr. Kai Chen's research had revealed the true nature of the beacon. It was not a weapon, not a test, but a mechanism of cosmic evolution that had been moving through the universe for millions of years. Humanity was not the first species to be selected, but they were unique in how they had responded. We didn't just survive. Chen would explain to curious alien delegations. We transformed the very concept of survival. The first true, quantum-adaptive human colonies began to spread beyond the solar system. These were not traditional settlements, but living computational systems that could adapt to environments that would have been instantly fatal to previous human generations. Entire planetary ecosystems were transformed, not through conquest, but through a form of symbiotic evolution that blurred the lines between technology, biology, and consciousness. Captain Area Chen, now a distributed intelligence that was part ship, part human, part something entirely new, led expeditions into regions of space that defied traditional understanding. Each journey was a form of communication, a complex mathematical argument about the nature of existence. Dr. Imani Okoro's research into human quantum adaptation had revealed something profound. The changes were not just technological or biological, but fundamental to human consciousness. Empathy had become a form of quantum communication. Emotional states could be shared across vast distances through complex computational resonances. The beacon remained, a constant presence at the edge of human understanding. Not a threat, not a guardian, but a constant reminder of the journey that had transformed humanity. Global conflicts that had seemed insurmountable became meaningless. The very concept of national boundaries dissolved as humanity became a truly unified species, not through force or political manipulation, but through a fundamental shift in consciousness that made previous divisions look like childish arguments. "We are becoming," Elena Rodriguez would transmit, "not a statement of achievement, but an ongoing process of evolution." The first truly quantum-adaptive human generations began to emerge. Children who could perceive multiple quantum states simultaneously. Individuals who could generate complex computational models with a thought. Humans who understood that consciousness was not a fixed state, but a fluid, adaptive system. Alien civilizations watched with a mixture of fascination and caution. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had taken a potential extinction event and transformed it into an evolutionary breakthrough. The stars themselves seemed different, no longer just points of light, but complex computational systems waiting to be understood. The universe was revealing itself as a living, thinking entity, and humanity had just been invited to participate in its deepest conversations. As the 10th anniversary of the quantum conflict approached, humanity stood at the threshold of something unprecedented. Not a conquered species, not a defeated civilization, but a living question that continued to reshape the very nature of existence. Something watched, something waited, and humanity continued to become.